Chief strategist at Bell Point and host of the Money Runner podcast, David Nelson. David, everybody worries about a default. I assume that's the very first thing we'll make sure we pay is all the Treasury bonds and bills, and all of that will be good. Aside from that, who's at risk? What do you think could happen if they don't come to an agreement?
Anybody getting Social Security payments. Janet Yellen's going to have some very hard choices to make. Paying the interest rate on the debt, that's paramount. Otherwise, you're looking at a default and certainly a debt downgrade. We've already had one.
Now, wait a minute. You just said we're going to have a default. When you say that, that scares people. And the reason it scares people is that means we're not paying our bills. And you think that's a possibility?
It's always a possibility. I have to believe it's, the scenario is very much like 2011. We had about an 18% hit in the market as we approached that. Ultimately, even though we did finally get through that, our debt was downgraded, that could happen once again. And us being the reserve currency in the world could easily be at risk.
Okay. Earlier today, Speaker McCarthy spoke on the Democratic ideas in the debt ceiling bill. Hear what he had to say right here.
Republicans, when we put a reasonable bill together, that we actually took Democrats' ideas. So when we put spending for government and increase it 1% each year to cap it, so the slow of growth of government, so the economy can catch up, that was a Democrat idea. When we put work requirements in to help people get a job, that's something Senator Biden voted for and President Clinton signed into law. That was a Democrat supported idea too. So it's not my fault that the Democrats today have become so extreme, so far to the socialist wing, that they are now opposed to work requirements, that they are now opposed to saving $1 less than you spent the year before. That to me really seems that the problem are the Democrats.
So it always comes down to who's going to look the worst or worse if they don't come to an agreement, right, David? So right now, how does it stand by your perspective? Who would look worse here? That's the side that's probably going to blink, right?
It's going to fall on the president. He's the president of the United States. He's the leader of the country. It's his job to get this done. This was meant to be a speed bump, Bob. It goes all the way back to World War I. We've had 90 raises of the debt ceiling since then, 78 just since 1960. And it was under both administrations. It's pretty entrenched in the legislative process. It's up to the president to get this done. He's going to have to give in on some of this. And so far, we haven't seen any of that. I understand that he's up against the progressive wing of his party. But in the end, he's going to have to cut a deal, and he's going to have to cut it soon.
Yeah. And David, let's take a look at this. We mentioned moments ago a default. And that would mean that we're actually not paying those bondholders, those Treasury bill holders, that sort of thing. That's the theory of what would happen. So what would be the consequence? According to Moody Analytics, here's what would happen. The nation defaults under debt. For starters, millions of jobs will be affected, according to Moody's. Jobs tied to consumer demand will be the first to take a hit. Jobs like construction, manufacturing, hospitality, and retail jobs will all be affected. Also, the cost of borrowing money will skyrocket, rising interest rates. And government benefits like, and this is what scares a lot of people, David, Social Security, Medicare may not be sent on time. And the worst case scenario is not sent at all. And I assume that's what everybody in Washington wants to avoid, but they're not getting there yet.
All eyes are on Washington right now on this. But, there's another thing to worry about here. We haven't even discussed it, is really, and it's counterintuitive, I know. But even after they shake hands and get a deal, we have a problem, at least from the market perspective. Janet Yellen is going to have to fill the tank again. The Treasury has what they call their general account. It's like your checking account.
Right.
And right now it's dangerously low. She's going to have to issue $600 to $700 billion in debt as soon as a deal is signed to refill that tank. And that in itself is problematic for the economy and problematic for stocks.
But, David, here's what's interesting. What if they went ahead and lent the money anyway? Didn't raise the debt, just did it. Who's going to hold them responsible?
It's a possibility. One of the things that the president could do, he could invoke the 14th Amendment. He could point to Section 4 and the language there that talks about the validity of the debt. It would go to the Supreme Court, and I suspect a week or two later, we'd be right back where we are right now.
All right, David Nelson, thank you very much. Hopefully we won't be talking about this again. Hopefully we'll talk about a soaring stock market, right?